So all of these things play into that, to how we define ourselves, and self-identifying with a region. Some of you are from old families who've been in the Ozarks for generations. Some of you probably grew up here, but your parents came from somewhere else, or maybe your grandparents came from somewhere else. And you may consider yourself an Ozarker, but your neighbors back home may not consider you an Ozarker. They may consider you a newcomer. You know, even if you don't know any other place as home, they may still consider, because your family, they remember when your family showed up from Chicago or wherever that was, and they may not think of you as a newcomer. So there's really no easy way to define the cultural Ozarks and who's an Ozarker, who's not. What do we, how do we decide who's a bona fide Ozarker? I'll use this little story and then we'll wrap this part up. One of the things I do a lot is when I'm out traveling around the region, trying to get a better feel for this cultural definition of the Ozarks, where the boundaries are, is a lot of times I'll just stop in places, especially if I'm sort of on the fringe of the region. I'll just stop somewhere and I'll ask someone, am I in the Ozarks? Or are you an Ozarker? Or something real annoying like that. And so one night I was coming back from, I think I was driving from Jeff City to Rolla. And I went through this little town called Vienna, which is up in Marys County. And if you can barely see the dots up here. Vienna corresponds with this dot, the dot on the east, or the right dot. Vienna is in Marys County. It's an old, as you would expect, an old German-speaking settlement. Predates the Civil War. And so I stop in Vienna and go into the convenience store there. I think there may be two, or maybe just the one. I don't know. It's not very big at all. And I walk in and I go up to the counter and buy a soda pop or something like that. That may be one of our words later on, soda pop. And I get my soda pop and I go up and I say, I ask the woman working at the counter, am I in the Ozarks? And she looked at me kind of funny, like, they usually do when I ask that question. And she said, no. And I said, well, where would I have to go to get to the Ozarks? And she said, Iberia. She was real specific with it. And she said Iberia. So she said, oh, it's about 12 or 15 miles down this way. You get there on this highway and you go down there. So here's Vienna and here's Iberia. Two great town names, by the way. In neighboring counties, Iberia's in Miller County, Vienna's in Marys County. And so here's where we were, not in the Ozarks. She said, go over here in the Ozarks. And that kind of tells you how tricky cultural definitions of a region are. Vienna, an old German town, a German-speaking town from years ago, Catholic, didn't really associate itself with the Ozarks, which to them was, those other people, those English-speaking people or those Protestant people. That's somewhere else. The Ozarks is that we're not hillbillies. We're not part of the Ozarks. Iberia was part of the Ozarks as far as she was concerned. Had a different history to it, and you could have that story repeated all over, especially all up and down through here. One town, not Ozarks, 10 miles away, Ozarks. So that's part of the difficulty in identifying the region. And that's why you can't just use the geographer's definition. If you're talking about people, if you're talking about history, it doesn't always work that way. And as I mentioned earlier, you got people over in here, like my student from last semester, who say, I'm from the Ozarks. Even though he lives on the prairie, what geographers would consider, the beginnings of the plains over there. And you got people down in here. You can go down south of this line and find business names, Ozark this and Ozark that. And people who would consider themselves in the Ozarks